Welcome to version 5 of the CB&Q in Wyoming. I'm Mark Pruitt. Today is December 3rd, 2019, and this is Layout Construction Update number 1. Sorry if I sound a little hoarse, I'm just getting over a really nasty cold. This is the new basement as it currently looks. The floor is covered with huge piles of crap still to be unpacked and put away. It doesn't look like there will ever be room for a layout, does it? The new layout is in the planning stages, which we'll see in a minute or two. While that's going on, I'll be putting down an insulated floating floor, then finishing the walls and ceiling. In my previous video, I referred to this new layout as version 4. I was wrong. This is actually version 5. We'll talk about that in a minute or two as well. Here are a few stills of the new basement. It looks even more cluttered than it did in the video. You can see benchwork sections and legs from the old layout scattered around the room, and in the video you may have noticed the Casper engine facility leaning against a wall. Everything appears to have survived the move in great shape. As I said, planning of the new layout has begun. This plan view shows the entire basement of the new house. For comparison, the light blue outline shows the walls of the old layout in Merchantville. I have the area above the rectangle marked stairs for the train. Below that is partitioned off into storage and a new library. The space I have for the train is slightly smaller than the old Merchantville basement. Still, I think it provides ample space for a very satisfactory layout. I've begun laying out concepts for the Burlington main line for the new layout. All of the curves shown are 30-inch radius at this point. Please comment with any thoughts you may have on these concepts. Here's the first. Since Casper has been brought from the old layout, it's pretty detailed. The pink lines and location names are conceptual arrangements for the remainder of the layout. This concept has some tight aisleways in the left-hand side that I may be able to relieve with a bit of tweaking, but I could probably make much better use of the big empty space just to the right of Basin. In this second arrangement, Casper extends straight out from the long wall and runs adjacent to the stud wall by the furnace. I find this one intriguing in that it physically puts Casper in the middle of the room with the main line extending both directions, just as the prototype Casper is in the middle of the subdivision with the line extending both directions. Still, I'm not sure I like this concept, which probably means it will be the one I will ultimately go with. In this third arrangement, I particularly like the position of Casper. It fits there like it was designed for that spot. This also frees up the entire long wall for a nice length of the Wind River Canyon, plus some decent single-track runs between several of the towns. The big problem is where you see the heavy red X. That turn-back loop completely blocks access to the layout, meaning I would have to put a lift out or duck under to the left of the stairs. Leaving out Basin and adjusting the position of Casper a bit may allow for a turnaround curve at the left wall. That would leave room for Cody, a stub end branch, where Basin is marked. I'll be fleshing out these and a few more conceptual arrangements over the next months as I finish the basement. At this point, I thought it might be interesting to look back at earlier versions of the CB&Q in Wyoming, starting with the first full-blown version of the layout in Wenonah, New Jersey. I had incorporated elements of the operating concepts and layouts going all the way back to the 1980s, but this is the first layout designed with the basic scheme in its entirety. This was the most compact version of the railroad. The footprint was roughly 33 by 22 feet. Minimum radius was 30 inches, the same as all later versions of the layout. This was my first layout to incorporate a helix, which in this instance had 2 tracks. Of course, a helix implies a second deck, and this layout had 2 full decks. Pretty much all the major locations along the Burlington main line between Franny and Orrin were included, including the Cody branch. Construction of this layout never got very far. In this area, what I called the alcove, I got some of the hidden tracks under the helix and Cody finished. In this view, you can see additional benchwork construction in the foreground. This layout came down when I moved to Merchantville, New Jersey, and began construction of version 2 of the CB&Q in Wyoming. This version was, in some ways, the most ambitious one. The footprint was roughly 33 by 29 feet. This layout had my rather infamous Behemoth Helix, a 4-track helix with a footprint of 9 feet by 7 feet, and which swallowed 8.4 scale miles, or 171 sections of Atlas Flex Track. It was the subject of a clinic I gave at several NMRA divisional and regional meets and 2 national conventions. It took nearly a year to build all by itself. Like version 1, this was a full 2-deck layout with the exception of the Wind River Canyon Peninsula. It also incorporated part of the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad from a staging yard representing Lusk, Wyoming on the upper deck to the modeled town of Lander, end of the CNW's Cowboy Line, on the lower deck. This version of the railroad survived the longest. When it was disassembled, I had worked on it for about 7 years. Here's a shot of the completed Behemoth Helix. This is one of the last pictures of the layout, focused again on the Helix, but showing Seattle staging of the Northern Pacific below and Glen Rock in the far background. This shot shows Glen Rock with some early scenery in progress. Below it is Minneapolis staging of the Northern Pacific, while you can see the upper deck above. Up there, Grable would have been built. This layout was disassembled in 2010 when I was transferred to the Boeing 787 plant in North Charleston, South Carolina. Version 3 of the layout, which was only under construction for a bit more than 2 years, was in Allendale, South Carolina. This version was different than any of the others I've built before or since. It had the largest footprint of any by far at 59 by 27 feet. The track plan was not completely detailed out, just a general arrangement of the lines with the towns to be fleshed out later. That was mostly a later that never came. This layout was on the second floor of the house. These are the best surroundings I've ever had, or ever will have, for a layout. The main room was beautiful, as you can see here. This layout is where I discovered I enjoyed modeling large rail yards. This is a view of Laurel Yard on the layout. It's the first layout I ever built where the yard gave me a sense of the prototype. This is also the last picture I ever took of the Allendale layout. My wife developed breast cancer, which necessitated a move closer to work, so this layout came down. That illness, which ultimately proved terminal, also brought about a 4-year hiatus from the hobby. A few years after the Allendale layout came down, I was ready to retire. That I did in March 2018, and after serious thought, my new wife and I moved from South Carolina back to my house in Merchantville, New Jersey, which I had rented out. So began version 4 of my model railroad. I briefly considered rebuilding version 2 of the layout since I was back in the same space. But being a bit older, I was concerned that it would be too big an undertaking to ever get operational. So this layout became something of a synthesis of the earlier Merchantville layout and the Allendale one. It would incorporate a slightly smaller version of the Allendale Laurel Yard, but would have only a small second deck to carry the Cody branch over Laurel. This layout was documented in monthly video updates posted on YouTube. As it turned out, those regular updates kept me motivated to work steadily, if not overly quickly, on the layout, in order to have something new to post each month. Here is one of the later overall photos of the layout before the backdrop on the peninsula went up. This shot, a few days before the layout came down, shows the illuminated roundhouse. And so ended version 4 of the railroad after about 14 months of construction. A bit of explanation as to why this layout came down may be in order. In May 2019, property taxes went up by about 7%, following a nearly 10% jump the year before. I knew taxes in New Jersey were high, they always were. But an almost $2,000 per year property tax jump in 2 years, with the prospect of more every year to come, was just too much. After doing some investigating, we discovered that moving to Wyoming, where I grew up, would save us over $18,000 a year in taxes at least. On a fixed retirement income, that's a big chunk of change. So we made plans, sold the house in New Jersey, and bought the new place in Casper, Wyoming. Hopefully this is the last move, and version 4 of the CB&Q in Wyoming will be the last layout I ever have to dismantle. Version 5 development is enthusiastically underway, and I'll document progress on it and the basement finishing in the next several videos. So there we have it, the early beginnings of version 5 and a short trip down memory lane. Please be sure to leave your thoughts on the new layout development concepts. They will be of immense value. And with that, thanks for watching. I'll see you next month.